Hi friends, this is a request. I posted a picture of this deck up on For Love of Cards, and a couple folks asked if I would show the deck. I think there's been some limited availability, which is odd. So I thought I had seen it on Amazon, and I went to order it, and it said it was sold out. I just kept waiting and waiting, and finally I decided to just order it right from US Games. And that worked out well. You know, you do have to pay for shipping if you're not a Prime. You know, if you're used to Prime, you're going to have to pay for shipping, and that sucks. But it arrived pretty quickly, so I say bravo US Games. I have, like, this weird sense that they're trying to push sales directly through their site lately, or at least discourage Amazon. I don't know, it's weird, and that may just be perception, but... So, this is the Tarot de Maria Celia by Lynard-Jym Narcisso, and I really love it a lot. And this will be pretty quick. So what I'm going to do, I think, just to make this fast, or you know, easy, is I'll walk through the trumps really quickly, and then I'll do like a spread of the pips, and so you can sort of see them all at once. Because the Marseille decks, there's not a whole lot to look at pip-wise. So, anyway, it's a deck that comes in a 10. I only have one other of these, which was a gift at the Reader Studio, and it's the Zillick Tarot. So this is the first one I've ever purchased. So, typical, you know, mass market, but really nice deck in a tin. There are 2 artist title cards. Love the, you know, it just makes it easy to throw it in a bag. Now, it comes with a little white book, but I'll actually say, for a little white book, this is pretty good, especially if you are new to reading with Marseille or pip-style decks, because it goes through a basic discovery, that's not the word I'm looking for, a basic meaning of the trumps, or the majors, and I think they're pretty standard by and large. They're not necessarily how I've come to see them, but that's, you know, to start out with, it's great. And then it goes through the suits and their associations, and then it goes through the numbers. And again, not necessarily the same associations I've made with them. Some of them are. But I think that, you know, you could actually probably, if you're starting out, get a real decent appreciation for reading with the number and suit associations just from this little white book. So I say, well done, Lynard-Jym Narcisso, on this little white book, because I think it's a pretty robust and useful thing. So I give that a thumbs up. The deck is really beautiful. Now I have it, that's why I have this out. So I edged this deck because I just loved the back, so I edged the deck in this red color, because it just, I've always sort of wanted to use red on a deck, but it just really looks rad with the back, so that's what I did. But yeah, let me zoom in. Let's walk through the trumps really quickly. And everything's beeping and buzzing. It's been quiet around here all day, but here we go. All right, pretty standard from a Marseille standpoint, but really just beautiful colors. It's a great deck if you're usually turned off by the more primary color base of more traditional Marseille decks. You know, I quite love I've come to really love these colors and traditional style Marseille decks. This is the Edition Millennium. Actually, it gives you a sense of how small this little deck is. It really is sort of like a pocket deck. And this is a little bit longer than a standard tarot card. So, it's really the coloration that's different, and this beautiful style, this sort of ink on parchment wash I really love. And the expressions on the characters really it's just a lot of life in these images. And so if you're not a fan of the woodblock prints of Marseille, it's similar in style, but it really does a beautiful job of reimagining the standard imagery and just freshening it up and giving it some life and color. It's very purple and red, but and jewel tones. And so sometimes you miss that when you're reading with more Marseille or antique decks where the coloration was limited, partially because of the printing abilities of the time. But in terms of the trumps, I mean, they're really pretty standard issue Marseille, which I appreciate, which it allows, again, for something that I've been reaching for in a lot of decks these days, which is a neutral voice that I can engage with the context of the question and the cards rather than have a meaning or something imposed for me. But yeah, if you've seen the Jean Noblette or the Conver decks, this is pretty similar. I really like this death card. And traditionally, it does not have a title on a lot of decks. It usually has a number. This has neither. There's a weariness to that card that I think is interesting. But again, you know, aside from the color, there's nothing in here that's going to shock anyone who is a Marseille traditionalist other than the color. For some folks, that color means something in the original decks. It's not something that I really work with. So, Sun, Judgment, and the World. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause and I'll lay out the suits and just sort of show them to you all at once. So I'll be back in a minute. Got a little glare here on the quartz, but this is the suit of wands. Again, it's very standard issue Marseille style, just with these beautiful colors. And it really does look nice laid out. I think that the color choices are really rich and vibrant and just really easy to look at. And so the quartz are, I'll just move them up a little bit to get rid of that. Oh, can't really fight that glare there. Damn lighting. So it's Valet, Cavalier, Rain, and Roy, and they don't have the suit names on the cards, but the objects they're holding are really clear, so that makes it easy to see. So that's the suit of wands, and I'll come back with cups in a sec. And here we have the beautiful suit of cups. One thing you'll notice, it's very subtle, but there is a slight background difference between the colors. So the suit of wands has a sort of brown-orange background. The cups have a bluish, and then when we get to the swords, you'll see this sort of a purplish. So it's really thoughtfully done. It's not just color applied randomly. Again, you know, this is what the suits of cups will look like traditionally. You know, the two of cups usually has some sort of marking there at the bottom, but as a modern deck it doesn't, and that's not consistent across. But you get the arabesques, you get the plant life, and again the court cards are really, you know, in the same style as the majors. They're just really, you know, it just looks really nice. It has kind of an old-fashioned quality without feeling stodgy. So let's look at the swords. Our suit of swords, again with the purplish background. And this is, you know, there's a stained glass quality to these, I feel like, that you get. I just think these are so beautiful. Another thing I'll say, which I haven't yet, is that I like that there's a number at the top of each card. That makes it just, you really, as a reader, I like to read, especially when I'm reading with Marseille style decks and I'm using more cartomantic techniques. I like to read really quickly and sort of see, okay, what I have the 2, I have the 3, I have the 4. You know, I have the 10, I have the 9. And that just helps me start having some initial reactions really quickly that I build from. And so I like to kind of know what I'm looking at really quickly, and the fact that there's a number at the top helps. Another thing that this does is if you do use reversals, I go back and forth, but you can see whether the card's reversed or not. So again, really, really beautiful works of art here. And another thing I can say too is you can tell as you're looking at it closely that this isn't just a retread of the same image over and over again. There's thought, you know, effort that went into each of these. It's a repeating pattern, but the repeating pattern isn't the same from card to card. There really was individual work done on each of these. So that's the suit of swords. And we'll come back and we'll look at the suit of pentacles or coins, and then I'll show you how it shuffles, and I'll kind of talk about why I really like this. All right, so here's our suit of coins. And again, you can see that there's a difference in color saturation, color tone. This is a yellow or orangier, as opposed to the sort of brown-orange of the wands, the blue of the cups, the purple of the swords. This has a burnt yellow quality to it. And again, really beautiful, very on brand for Marseille decks. Of course, the copyright in the bottom right is going to bother folks. But, you know, you get used to it, I think, for a lot of things. And so, yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say other than how beautiful the art is, because, of course, it's beautiful and it's straight up Marseille. Like, there's not much deviation, if any, from that sort of Jean Noblet model. I think that my guess is that was the inspiration, was that particular deck. You know, again, in terms of cardstock, I really like it. I would imagine it's similar to any other 10 deck that US Games puts out. It is small. It's playing card size. This is the Maybe Lenormand, and it's the same size as that, which I love. I love that for a few reasons. It's one of the reasons why I love the Marshmallow Marseille too, but I use that one a lot because I like to do a lot of big spreads with these kinds of cards, with Marseille or Pip decks. You know, where in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you might spend a lot of time poring over the symbolism in the cards. There isn't really much here. What you've got is a little bit of visual that is useful, certainly, but it's not, you know, you can't sort of sink into the snail on the 9 of coins and talk about its symbolism that much. You know, there's just not that much there. So one of the things I like to do to get a lot of detail is to use a lot of cards. And my favorite spread, really, to use with Marseille or Pip decks is the Council of 13. I'm going to lay that out right now. That I got from Camellia Elias's book on the Marseille, which, you know, it's a fairly old, it's not an uncommon spread for card reading, playing card reading, Lenormand reading, etc. And I've done a video on it before, but I'll just, since this is going to be an unusually brief video for me, I'll lay one out. I do believe that questions are really key when it comes to reading anything. You know, you've seen that or heard me talk about that before probably, but I really do think that questions matter because it just gives you something to work with. But yeah, just as I'm shuffling here, you can see how well it shuffles. It shuffles even better when you're not wrapped around a tripod trying to make a video. So the Council of 13, it's sort of not, it's like a 9-card box spread laid out a little bit differently, but you read it in groups of 3. I'm gonna have to zoom out. But again, I like the size of this deck because I like to do large spreads like this one, and I often can't fit them in. But with this deck, you can see that I can. So it makes it really nice because I can do a large spread like this. Ideally, you know, I'd situate my lighting in such a way that you wouldn't get glare. This is one reason why, you know, those of us who complain about glossy cardstock complain about glossy cardstock. And this isn't glossy, it's just typical, but matte cardstock really resists glare, so it makes it easier when you're doing a video reading to do it. But this is it's one of my favorite spreads because what it starts with is a theme. You read the first card as a theme overall, and then you start reading in groups of 3, always with the first card in the middle as it's as the middle card. So the first card is sort of always in play, but you read it the way you lay out. So you look at the first card and you read 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So it's like a quick thing. You just sort of get an impression. Just to give you an example, like let's say this was someone who wanted to propose to their girlfriend, and they wanted to know whether this was a good time. And so right out of the gate, I see like there's some struggle because we have the 5 of coins. So as a theme, there's probably some daily struggles at work. Maybe they're not financially stable enough yet. Maybe they're having some difficulty adjusting to the sort of post romantic part of a relationship, but there's conflict going on in their daily life. So that's the theme I'm going to explore as I go through and do this reading and try to find the answer. So in many ways, this sets me up to say, may not be quite the right time, and now I'm going to find out why. So I have the 9 of coins, and 3 of swords. It seems like they're working really hard with the 9 of coins. That is the 9. Yeah, it's the 9. So there's a lot of hard work going. They're pushing, and it's probably creating some communications problems with them. The 3 of swords indicates sort of growing communication, growing thinking. But this isn't a good situation. So we have like the 9 of coins is a lot of effort, a lot of practical responsibility going in, and there's like it's making them think in new ways about the relationship, because this is all about the relationship, and there's some conflict going on in terms of the central image, right? Because I think that the thing, what this is telling me right out of the gate is that this is so early in the day. I probably should have warmed up a little bit. My guess is that they've been working really hard on this relationship. There's been some struggles that have come up. They're trying to communicate through it. They're trying to find new ways. But what's happening is, my guess is that this person wants to propose as a way of locking in a relationship that isn't quite working right now. So this first 3 kind of gives me my initial impulse, right? There's conflict, there's a lot of effort going on, there's some new thinking, and it's revealing things that haven't been revealed before. And what I'm getting is that there's conflict in this relationship. It's a lot of work. They're thinking about it in a new way, and I'm guessing right now that this person is trying to lock in something to make sure they have a relationship, even though the relationship itself may not be going quite well right now. So then I look at these 3, and again I have another 9. So I've got more effort, more labor, more like, it's not even just effort and labor. 8 is labor and effort. 9 takes it and pushes it to the like stretches to whether or not we're going to feel like we can get there. We have another 9 and we have another 3. And an interesting thing, of course, about 9, and we have a 9 and a 3 here too, is that it takes the 3 and it, multiplies it by itself. So it takes this growing sense of something happening and multiplies it. So there's something happening where this person's feeling something new. And again, there's like a question of whether it's sustainable, whether they can really make it to the finish line there. And so that's happening both in their daily sense of their lives and in their emotional sense of their lives. And they're both feeling and thinking something new as well. So I've done this, now I look at this, and this. Ideally, I would have set a significator, for the reading, just to sort of get a sense. That's what I've been doing lately, is just saying, okay, you're the Knight of Wands, for example. And so we'll say that, in this case, that the person I'm reading for is the Knight of Wands. The Knight of Wands is looking away from all of this trouble, but their partner, the King of Cups, I'm assuming it's their partner because it's the only other court card in the reading right now. We'll just say the partner sees this struggle, and the partner is smart enough and maybe has enough experience to know that there is things that are going on. They do see the daily labor. They do see the fact that there's conflict, that they're starting to think new things, and they see that their partner doesn't see it. So again, as I go along, this sort of proves my initial thought here. The knight may sense that something's going on, but he's not looking at it. And so the knight is trying to lock in something but ignoring all the problems. So I read 1, 2, 3 that way. Now I read 1, 2, 3, and it's hard to see here, but this is, it's upside down. This is the 7 of Wands and the Fool. It's the first Wands cards we've had so far. And the 7 internalizes, and Wands are about passion and want. So this person is really thinking about, and it ties nicely to the Knight of Wands here, this person is really thinking about experiencing what they want, what their passions are, what their enthusiasms are, and they're moving along blindly despite this conflict. You can't really see the Fool here, but I'll move it up. So the combination of this, and this, or this, this, and this, is like their passions are overcoming what they want inside, is forcing them to move forward without really considering anything. And both, again, the Knight of Wands and the Fool are both looking without considering anything else. All right, so we've done this, this, and this. Next, we do this diagonal here. So we have the World, the Five of Coins, and the Two of Cups. So here's a real break from what we've had so far. Something really different is happening because I'm not necessarily looking at conflict in the same way. The World and the Two of Cups changes a little bit the tone. The World is traditionally pretty good. It sort of suggests everything. It suggests being on top of the world, so to speak, but it's also completion. And the Two of Cups is like two people together. So almost in a way, I feel like this relationship is completed. And the part of the conflict that this person experiences in day-to-day life is that they haven't recognized that. Again, this diagonal is a little... And this seems to happen a lot, actually. I find that with the diagonals, I get a different layer of messaging with this spread. It's always interesting to me. So I have the Six of Cups and the Empress. So, again... more cups action here. Six of Cups. Six is about beauty. It can also be vanity. And sort of feeling really good. The combination of the Six of Cups and the Empress isn't a bad thing, actually. They sort of suggest a certain amount of fluidity, intelligence, intuition, nurturing things. But remember that in the middle is this feeling of conflict, of disruption of life. And so what I get here is that they are actually being somewhat vain in their sense that they can make things work. You know what I mean? They're feeling that they can overcome because they're powerful enough as the Empress. And the Empress, if you look, is only looking at two good cards, the Three of Cups and the Two of Cups. So the Empress, again... If the Empress is another facet of the Knight of Wands here, the Empress is saying, yeah, things are good. She's only looking at this row. And so that's creating a sort of vanity and a false sense of beauty about the relationship. But at the heart of the relationship is conflict that the other partner sees, but that this person doesn't. All right, so throughout this is all the work I would do to get to my answer. The middle three cards really usually tell me yes or no at the beginning, but the rest of it sort of explores why and how. And in this case, the question was, is this a good time to propose? And depending on who I was working with and how, I would say no, it's really not. It looks like there's some conflict that you're ignoring that you have to deal with. You know, and depending on how much detail they wanted me to go in, I'd say there's a pretty strong sense that the relationship has worn itself out, that it's gone about as far as it can go. In part because your partner sees all this struggle, but you don't, and you're sort of vainly thinking about what's good and ignoring all the struggle, ignoring all the practicalities of the relationship, and you're not learning the new things that your partner has about this relationship. So while you're focused on the good and focused on the future, it's really an act of vanity. Your own passions are forcing you to sort of move without thinking, and it's possible that the relationship's really run its course. So I probably would not recommend proposing here. So, but again, it depends on how much information someone wants about their relationship. You know, if they just want the yes or no answer, is this a good time to propose? I'd say no, it's not. But I always like to give a reason why, because no, it's not really helpful. You know, if they really do care about this person, if I'm wrong that the relationship has not run its course, then maybe they can turn around and see this conflict. The problem is that people tend not to, you know, so that's always the struggle as a reader. You know, this knight's moving forward, this fool's moving forward. And the fool, interestingly, is the base of the reading, you know, so all of this rests on someone who's not really thinking. And in a sense, they've turned their backs on thinking. There's one swords card, and the Knight of Wands, who represents the Querent, is looking away from it. Now, I would read this differently probably if I had set a specific significator. This isn't really a real question, but it just gives you a sense of why I like large spreads, because I start with an answer that gives me a sense of, like, is this a good time? Fives equal disruption. Sometimes that can be good, but there's, like, disruption that's happening from a real push to like force things to happen and lessons that need to be learned. And as I go deeper and deeper, I start to get a sense. In essence, I've talked about this before, what the first card or the first collection of cards in a reading frequently does is it sets up a thesis, and then I use the rest of the reading to try to prove that thesis. If I can't, then I go back to the drawing board. And moments like this where the World and the Two of Cups sort of interrupted my feeling for a moment, those are good, right? Because I had a moment of, and same thing with the Six of Cups and the Empress. Like, these two diagonals here really forced me to pause and say, am I proving my thesis, or is something wrong? So that gives me an opportunity to wrestle with those combos and say, can they really fit this thesis? And they did in this case. You know, the relationship has run its course between two people. So I look at the Two of Cups as two people coming together, the World as being completion. So it looks like the relationship might be completed. Again, if the spread were different, if I had gotten a different impulse initially, I could read that as these two people are on top of the world. But remember, I have this conflict card in the middle. And same thing here. You know, I've got the Six of Cups, which is always really beautiful, and the Empress, which is usually a really good card. But I've got this conflict in the middle, and I've got an Empress who's looking only at what's good. And so Six, in this case, becomes a vanity or looking in vain at something. And I also was able to prove that because the Knight of Wands and the Fool are both looking in the same direction without seeing anything. The Empress is looking ahead and seeing only good, but the Knight of Wands and the Fool ain't seeing anything. On the other hand, this King of Cups is seeing it all, and they're seeing that their partner doesn't. So I'm constantly like checking in against the rest of the reading to say, is this interpretation valid? Does it support my original thesis? And in this case, it did. Now, I would have read this very differently if my King of Cups had been the querent, right? If the King of Cups had been the querent, the King of Cups sees all this conflict, but they're on the other side of this now. I think if they asked, is this a good time to propose, I would say the answer is still no, because they're seeing a partner who isn't paying attention to all the struggle that's happening between them. You know what I mean? If the World, say, represented the partner, and this is something, you know, I'm just throwing this out there. Let's not have a court card in there. We're gonna get all court cards. Let's say I had only pip cards and there were only these two people looking at each other. In this case, I would say that there's two people here who see the struggle and are ready to challenge it face on. You know, in that context, the Empress is focusing on what's good, not ignoring what's bad, because these two people see it. But they're focusing on nurturing what's good in the relationship, you know, and so this becomes less vain, you know, because these two people are together looking at the struggle, they see it, and they're in it together. I would say that that's a different situation because, you know, they recognize the reality of relationships. Relationships involve struggle. So in that case, I would say, you know, I mean, as long as the conflict that you're facing isn't insurmountable, maybe this is a good way to sort of prove that you're on board with the, you know, solving it together. And in this case, then the Fool becomes a little more about, you know, sort of blind faith and going off into the future. A little more, not thoughtlessly, a little more with faith that things are going to work out, you know. So little things can really change, which is why I always talk about how important context is. But anyway, yeah, I didn't even mean to go down this road. I just wanted to show why I like big, like little Marseille decks like this, because I can do large spreads. So I thought this was going to be a short video, and it's not. But anyway, this is a look at the Tarot de Maria Celia by Lynard-Jym Narcisso. I adore it. I'm really happy to have it. I guess availability is odd, but you should be able to get it through US Games, and it did arrive pretty quickly. So I say bravo to this. And I hope you do too.